We're going to start off with a panel discussion that will be run by Eric Feil, who will be out in a moment, who is our COO and also editorial director. And the panel is Steve Israel, who's a retired 12-year congressman, just retired 2 years ago, who's become a novelist, fiction novelist. He's written a book called Big Guns, which is about a time in America when the anti-gun lobbies become strong, and so they pass a law saying everybody in America should have a gun, because that would help the industry. Also on the panel, the other member of the panel is Joy Behar from The View. She's just written a book called The Great Gas Bag. The A to Z, she tells it like it is, the A to Z of surviving Trump. And I'd like to invite the three of them out here now.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eric Feil, the COO and editorial director at Dan's Papers. Thank you so much for coming out. I am going to introduce two people I'm thrilled to have on this panel this afternoon. Dan gave a little bit of an introduction. He gave away the secret to Steve's book. You got to read it anyway. That doesn't matter. You know the kind of the punchline. But our first guest is our former U.S. congressman turned political commentator on TV, turned author of Big Guns, Steve Israel. And our second guest, you may know her. She's been on a little show called The View. She's won an Emmy. She's an actress. She is, she writes all kinds of stuff, including the very hilarious, regardless of the side of the political spectrum, but maybe more funny if you're on one side than the other, The Great Gas Bag, introducing Joy Behar. Joy. So we're going to start this afternoon. The only one who may talk more or write more than Dan Ratiner is me, so I forewarn you. But my voice is scratchy, so it'll go quickly. Two quotes that are going to sort of set the stage for our discussion this afternoon. The first, and I won't tell you who said them. You may know, you may not. We have to uphold a free press and freedom of speech, because in the end, lies and misinformation are no match for the truth.
Who said that, Donald Trump?
If you go the exact opposite way, but you're getting closer with our second quote, truth isn't truth. So this is the framework for what we have here today. There's a bunch of writers out here in the audience who've entered the competition, people who write professionally, people who write for a hobby, people who love the written word and what it communicates and how important it is that we have a place where anybody's ideas, anybody's thoughts can come out, be represented, and ideally civilly discussed. So there's no political bent to today's conversation, although some of it may bend one way or the other, depending on where we go. So I would like to ask each of you here, you've both written works of satire, one based on a lot of fact but satirical, one outside of the town of Assabog, which I must miss every time I drive between Napeague and Montauk, that you said, two stories here that are politically charged. So we'll start with Steve. Tell us a little bit about the impetus for the book, why you went satirically, and then how you came up with the ideas for it.
Sure, well, it's great to be here. It's great to be anywhere that's not the United States Congress these days, actually. I served in Congress for 16 years and realized that we weren't getting anything done in politics, and the way I could be most effective was to write. And so I did one novel, The Global War on Morris, which was a satire on the Bush administration, learned that I loved writing. And I wanted to do something on the question that I faced more than any other question in my 16 years in Congress, which was, why doesn't Congress do something on gun violence? Why, when there's a mass shooting, why do you limit yourself to a moment of silence on the floor of the House, you lower the flag, you tweet your condolences, your thoughts, your prayers, but nothing else? And so I wanted to answer that question with satire. Problem is, first of all, it's very tricky to write satire about politics and guns in the NRA. And secondly, I really didn't have a plot until, I'll answer your question, until one day. This is after the shooting at Sandy Hook. And I was convinced that the United States Congress was finally going to act. And I flew to Washington the next day, and I realized nothing was going to happen. State and local governments started passing sensible gun safety. And then one morning I was reading my New York Times, page A9, flipping through the Times, and I learned about this small city in Georgia, a city called Nelson. The city of Nelson, Georgia was so outraged that state and local governments were passing gun safety bills that they decided to pass an ordinance, this is absolutely true, that mandated that every resident of Nelson, Georgia must own a gun. And I thought the writers of The Onion had infiltrated the New York Times when I read that. And so that was my plot. What if Congress considers a law that requires that every American, everybody in this room, must own a gun with sensible exceptions for children under the age of 7? And that became my pretense for big guns. And the concern I have now is this complete satirical, farcical treatment of Congress and the gun lobby is becoming truer every day. If you read the New York Times, our Secretary of Education yesterday announced that she's going to seek funding from the Department of Homeland Security so that teachers can buy guns in classrooms. So my book was meant as satire and paid for by your tax dollars. So the book was meant as satire, but it's becoming nonfiction.
And Joy, how about yours? I mean, you even have in your book, in the A to Z, a G is for guns. And to paraphrase it, if guns don't kill people, then why don't we give our soldiers spatulas? Which I think is a fairly brilliant observation. But yeah, I mean, how did you come up with the notion for your take on what's going on and the way you wrote The Great Gas Bag?
Well, mine is not as brilliant as Steve's here, but it's basically, I come from the Mel Brooks school of dealing with the world. So if you just make fun of people who are ridiculous. He's utterly ridiculous and deplorable. And so the only way to deal with him is to make fun of him. It's funny because we talk about him every day on The View. He's never come after us. So we're either irrelevant or he's petrified. I'm not sure.
He's petrified.
You think he's petrified?
Yeah.
So I wrote this book, the guide to A to Z guide to Trumpland, which tells. It's actually very informative. We did a lot of research, so people will learn stuff. But of course, it's almost obsolete because you can't keep up with him. I need a whole new book, starting from A to Z again. So that's basically it.
What have you found the reaction has been to your book once it came out? The fact that it is based, obviously you base it all, your commentary, your humor, on fact, but it is all fact-based, but clearly with one side.
A reaction from the right. They hate me on the right.
Well, sure.
Sean Hannity hates me, and
really?
I understand that there's a whole, Fox.com has a whole thing about how I'm a flashpoint for the right, and they think I'm a radical, which my grandson thinks is very cool, by the way. He's only 7, but he likes it. So the response is always, she's an idiot, we hate her, and why doesn't she shut up? A lot of, why doesn't she shut up, But I was never told to shut up as a child, so I never will.
But it's interesting, you see, you haven't been told to shut up.
Yeah.
But we are, frighteningly, someone who's been in journalism for more than a quarter century now, although I know I don't look it, that there are people who are starting now to shout down for people who do have opposing views they don't like, to shut up. And it's interesting, 2 years ago, we didn't have this panel up here to talk about books and writers and ideas, but 2 years ago was just about the start of the term fake news. If you go back and look, which is now, I think everybody either hears it, utters it, reads about it every day. Fake news, in my view, is not a thing. Fake news is simply a reaction to news that you don't like to hear. And what do you think about this term?
Years ago, I can add one thing to that. Years ago, there was a headline on the Post when Marlon Maples captured Donald from Ivana, and there was a headline that said, "Best sex I ever had." That was the beginning of fake news. So it wasn't just this year, 2 years ago. It happened many years ago. Sorry, go ahead.
How do you follow that?
Also because I think Paul Krugman the other day was saying that climate change, when they start denying climate change, that was the beginning of
Well, here's the thing. Look, fake news is an authoritarian device used to mask truth. So fake news leads you to doubt the truth. This is a device that has been used by fascists and by authoritarian regimes for as long as they've been around. Joy and I were talking in the green room about why Donald Trump won the election. I was telling her that I chaired the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee for 4 years, and my job was to get every Democrat on one disciplined, laser-focused message, for which I would have been eligible for the Nobel Prize had I been able to get Democrats. But that required me to do a ton of research in competitive districts in Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. And parts of Florida and Pennsylvania, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you, those folks in those counties, they really believe that there was fake news. And the reason for that is because the past several years has kind of untethered them from all of those important elements that they enjoyed in the past. They're untethered from their paychecks, from their jobs, from their aspirations. They're untethered from an economy that's changing. Instead of getting in a taxi, now you have to use Uber. They're untethered from feeling safe. When they go to a movie theater, we were talking, the last thing they think about when the lights grow dim is not their Pepsi and their popcorn, but where are the exits? How do I get out of here if somebody is shooting? And when you lose that faith in institutions, and you lose faith in government's ability to protect you, and you lose faith in the media, which is now, and I say this as an MSNBC contributor, when you view the media as kind of tribal and opinionated, it becomes very easy for an authoritarian like Donald Trump to further cut those threads, cast the entire media in doubt for the very specific goal of when there is an impeachable offense, when something major happens, he's going to say, just don't believe it, like he did a few weeks ago. What you hear is not being said. What you see is not there. This impeachment on money laundering didn't happen. It's just what CNN and MSNBC believes. That's why he's doing this.
You know, it's very interesting you say that, and what the public believes, what they hear, and what they read. Now, you both are writers who use the written word, which is delivered and taken in very differently from what is seen on TV, and then very differently from what is done social media-wise. You know, talking about the stats of whether America, where we trust our media at this point, the recent poll, 48% of Republicans, 26% of independent voters, and 12% of Democrats said the news media is the enemy of the American people. 48% of Republicans, 26% of independents, and 12% of Democrats.
Excluding Dan's papers.
Excluding Dan's papers, of course, because we are the friend of everybody. And going back to fake news, that Dan may have invented it. I don't really know the concept of it. So
don't you think that they mean different things by that? Like the Democrats may be referring to the New York Post, for example.
I absolutely do. And I was going to ask, right.
Fox TV, yeah.
Yeah, what do you take from this? I mean, as you see, because you deal with different feedback on all of your platforms each day. How do you take this kind of
I don't
poll?
watch Fox News, but I was reading something about it by somebody, I think on Facebook, who said he's just watched it over and over again for a week or so. And he can't believe how unbelievable, it's unbelievable what they're doing over there. Every 5 minutes, it's another story about an immigrant attacking somebody in the country. There is no discussion of any of this Cohen and Manafort things that are going on right now. So what are these people supposed to believe? That's what they keep feeding them, and that's all they watch. I mean, it's state-run television, we know that now. And it's like the dummies, the stupids are winning the war. It's upsetting.
Can I just add something to that? I'm less concerned about that than I am about the complete loss of civic knowledge that the American people have. I mean, there was a time you all took civics at some point in school. We don't teach civics anymore, and it's so bad now that, I just saw this statistic, something like 27% of high school graduates can name all three branches of government. 27%. 78% of high school graduates can name all three stooges. That's dangerous. Most Americans, if they were to take the U.S. citizenship exam that immigrants must take if they want citizenship, would fail. We would fail the citizenship exam. I'm now working with my friends at Long Island University on trying to re-engage students in civics and community service. It's easy to talk about fake news. It's easy to vilify institutions when people don't really understand how the government works and how our institutions work. We've got to re-engage Americans in understanding how their government and its institutions work.
And I think, it's the concept of civics and civility, and they kind of go that, having a civil discourse and discussing ideas. Both of your books, they bring across ideas that I think people would like to talk about. Would more and more people take time to read a book? I mean, books are long, they take an investment, but the investment and then the conversation that comes out of it is what makes them worthwhile. So the definition of satire, which is actually in Joy's book, which I loved when I saw it, it's a genre of literature in which vices, follies, abuses, and shortcomings are held up to ridicule, ideally with the intent of shaming individuals, corporations, government, or society itself into improvement. Now, although satire is usually meant to be humorous, its greater purpose is often constructive social criticism, using wit to draw attention to both particular and wider issues in society. So this is what exactly both of these books do. So I was going to hope if we could take a little moment here at the end. Steve, do you have a passage that you'd like to read to the crowd here? Because both your books use humor to such great effect to make people think. I know both of them have sparked conversations I've had at barbecues, cocktail parties, some with a more or less beer or maybe a little something else to spur things along, but to see how humor and that can work toward a conversation that we all need to have.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I just happen to have a page. So let me just set it up for you. The book is it's a satire about a Congress that must decide whether to pass the American Freedom from Fear Act, which compels every American to own and carry a gun at all times. And it is a satire of the NRA, and it takes place in Washington, D.C., but it also takes place right here in the Hamptons, in a little town that I call Assawag. And in this scene, the gun industry lobbyist, Sonny McCarthy, brings Otis Cogsworth, the CEO of Cogsworth International Armaments, who lives near someplace near Montauk, to meet with this Arkansas Republican congressman who's a war hero named Roy Durkee. Roy Durkee's office was decorated in Durkee. Beige walls displayed framed Durkee action shots. Durkee waving to a cheering crowd on election night. Durkee sitting across the president in the Oval Office. Durkee speaking to school children in Little Rock, dominating a panel of freshman representatives on the set of Meet the Press. On a separate wall positioned above a mahogany credenza, Durkee was in mud-splattered Special Forces fatigues in Afghanistan. Durkee in Oakley sunglasses, leaning against a Humvee, flashing a thumbs up. Durkee receiving the public heart. Sonny noticed that he'd kept his black hair trimmed neatly and still sported a ring from West Point. No wedding ring, she noted. But she already knew that from her research. Also noted was that when Durkee smiled, he revealed a slight space between his two front teeth, conveying a sense of boyish amiability. Durkee approached the subject at hand. "Mr. Cogsworth," he said, "my daddy taught me how to shoot with your guns. It's an honor to meet you." Otis cleared his throat. "Congressman, the honor is mine. It's refreshing to see someone in Washington who truly understands this country's Constitution." Durkee smiled, revealing again that space between his teeth. "Thank you, sir," he said. "When I was deployed to Afghanistan, I took my oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Got shot at for it. Thought if I could take on the Taliban in Helmand, I could take on this bunch of liberals in Congress." Here his jaw seemed to twitch and his eyes grew sullen. "I'm sure you heard, Mr. Cogsworth, how I took that bullet in Helmand, and how Christ and the Constitution saved my life." 2 more paragraphs. Sonny knew that Otis hadn't heard, although she included it in the briefing memo that he annoyedly tossed aside with a groan when she picked him up at the airport, so she leaned back and let Durkee mesmerize her boss. Durkee slipped a hand into his jacket pocket, produced a pamphlet-sized Constitution. It was soiled and tattered, and right through the center was a bullet hole. "Everywhere I went in Afghanistan," he explained, "I kept this pocket Constitution taped to my chest, close to my heart. One day we're defending a village down there in Helmand, walked straight into a Taliban ambush. Next thing I knew, I'm shot. Bullet passes right through my body armor and my pocket Constitution. Just a flesh wound, as they say, but I believe the Constitution and the good Lord saved my life." "Good Lord," Otis echoed, clearly as moved as Sonny expected. "That day," Durkee said, "Jesus told me if I get out of Afghanistan alive, I should go back to Arkansas and run for Congress in the 3rd District." Sonny said, "Jesus asked that specifically?" Sonny thought, "I'm Jesus Christ, and I approve this message."
Joy, would you like to pick a random letter of the alphabet? That's the ad-lib part. Let's go to right there.
Maybe T for Trump. Maybe M for Mueller.
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, what I wrote, it's 100 years ago. I think I remember what I wrote. Let's see, M is for Meryl Streep. M is for Mars, M is for masturbation.
They're all good.
Let me see that one. Oh, no, it's too dirty for this room. I'll have to buy the book for that one.
You'll just have to buy the book later at the book signing, and you go right to M,
I'll pick a
and
nice-
Joy will sign
I'm trying to
that
find
page
a
for
short
you.
one amongst yourselves.
So as Joy is looking, that is not a joke though, there is going to be a book signing after the ceremony when we hand out the prizes for the Literary Prize and the Emerging Young Writers Prize. Steve will be out there, Joy will be out there, our keynote speaker, Roger Rosenblatt, will be out there, Daniel Simone will be out there, and our founder, Dan Ratiner, will be out there, signing his book, In the Hamptons Forever, mostly true stories about the Hamptons, if you want to take a little peek and see what was true and not true about life out
This
here.
one's really short, because we're running out of time. I is for immigrant. The following people were immigrants to the United States. Donald Trump's grandfather, Donald Trump's grandmother, Donald Trump's first wife, Donald Trump's third wife, Jared Kushner's grandmother, Albert Einstein, Madeleine Albright, Joseph Pulitzer, Enrico Fermi, Irving Berlin, Alex Trebek, 8 of the signers of the Constitution, William Penn, Alexander Hamilton, the Pilgrims, Christopher Columbus, and the most important of all, Dr. Ruth. Can you imagine how much crankier Republicans would be if they weren't having good sex?
And on that, I think we can go no further. That is the perfect note. I want to thank Joy, I want to thank Steve, I want to thank all of you. Keep reading, the writers out there, keep writing, and remember that no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, the words and ideas have to be out there, they have to be allowed to be published, written, and discussed, because that is what makes America great.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do I read now? Do I read now?
No, you're going to come back. Joy's going to be back later, not once, but twice. No, Joy's never leaving. And then she's going to come to dinner, then she's going to come home, we're going to do math homework with my kids, it'll be great. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Ratiner.
We're now going to have a treat, which is a short concert, a tribute to Chopin on that piano. You've been wondering why it's there. It'll be performed by Richard Devens, who's in the audience for the moment, and I'd like you to come on up. And he's from Schenectady, and he's classically trained, and I hope you enjoy it. Just give me a hand. along to the awards now. The first group of awards are for emerging young writers. The entries in this particular competition are would be under the age of 26, I think, or 25, I'm not quite sure. And in the case, we felt they should have a separate category, and the awards will consist of 3 Judges' Choice Awards. They are people that didn't get the grand prize or second place, but the judges thought they should be honored anyway. So I wanted to say that if you're here, what you're going to be, your name is called, come on up. And if you're not here, if someone else can come up for you, we would appreciate it very much. There'll be 3 of these awards. I'd like to bring out Kimberly Goff to make these awards. She's right behind me, I think. She's Elaine Benson's daughter, and she's worked for the paper writing for many years, and here she is.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you all for coming. So, the envelope. The first award goes to Rory King, who wrote In, Out. Next is Serena Camici, who wrote Plum Island, Light. And third is Edie Saunders for Distance Makes the Heart Grow Fonder. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
We move now into the presentation for the 2 runners-up for the emerging writers. The first, these will be presented to you by Andrew Botsford, who's professor of English and is head of the Southampton College literary program they have there. And we're honored to have him. Andrew, come on out.
Just to prevent fake news, let's call it the Stony Brook Southampton Creative Writing Program at Stony Brook Southampton. Not Southampton College and not the English department. But I've been a judge for 3 or 4 or 5 years now, and I'm always impressed by the emerging writers and the adult writers as well. And I'd just like to say that it's a noble craft to write, and we're given the gift of language, which sometimes seems like a curse. But the people that use it are often the most interesting people in the room. And so you shouldn't write just for competitions or to be published, but you should write because it's going to make you more interesting, and that's a good thing. Consumer culture would have us believe that the most interesting person in the world is someone who drinks Dos Equis. And while I won't deny that writers like to drink a lot, it's not drinking a lot that makes them interesting. And so, but it is a muscle that needs to be exercised, and it's been exercised beautifully by these people. And I hope that you all continue to write, whether or not you win the first prize, or a runner-up prize, or a judge's prize, or no prize at all. The prize is in the writing itself, and you're all doing a wonderful job, so I hope you keep it up. There are 2 runner-up awards. And the runner-up number 1, I don't think that means anything. I think they're both equally runner-up. Goes to Dear Amy by Amin Choudhury, if I pronounced that correctly. And here she is. Beautiful story. Dear Anna. And now we'll announce the second runner-up. Runner-up number 2. It's not the second runner-up. And that would be The Yellow Surfboard by Timothy Facciolo. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for this award. It means a lot to me. And I just wanted to dedicate this story to my grandmother, who it's about. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my parents, my dad for introducing me to writing, my mother for always keeping me working, Father Stanley Okonski, Mr. Ritter, and all my English teachers along the way. Thank you.
Now we come to the grand prize for emerging writers. This is a prize of $1,000 and a trophy. And I must say, in both cases, both this and the main one, I think the pieces are excellent. And our presenter for this award is Dan Simone. He is a writer of nonfiction. He is well known for his book, The Lufthansa Heist, and he lives in Amagansett. He has another book out called The Pierre Hotel Affair, which is about a robbery of $17 million on New Year's Eve in a hotel in Manhattan at the Pierre. Come on out, please, Dan.
Good evening, good afternoon, and Crystal. I really sealed well. And this category goes to the title, Ungodly Darkness by Samuel Lefkowitz Kiana.
I guess I'd like to thank Captain Al, the Fisherman's Pal, for inspiring the story, and everyone else who was there.
Other things about Joy Behar, she's going to be coming out shortly to read that winning emerging author's essay. She's also an actress. She's appeared in Hiding Out, Cookie, it's Gary Shandling's show, which I saw, Manhattan Murder Mystery, Love Is All There Is, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, and Crisis in 6 Scenes. She won an Emmy for Outstanding Talk Show Host, as you might imagine, and also the GLAAD Media Award for Excellence in Media. Joy, come on out.
Thank you, Dan, for whipping them into a frenzy for me. Alrighty. This essay is not comedy, so I don't know why they asked me, but I'll do the best I can. Ungodly darkness. On the first day, God said, "Let there be light," and the universe was relieved of the darkness that engulfed it. But there were no creations to bask in that light, so either through evolution or the hands of God or some other method, beings came into existence to live under the light. But it was not a permanent fixture. The rotation of the earth caused the beautiful safety of light to disappear for hours on end. Some adapted to these times of darkness and thrived in them, others did not. Before the unnatural hue of streetlights in the cities, or the house lights of the suburbs, or the headlights of passing cars and lonely lights in the distance of more rural areas, before lanterns, before the first spark of fire, the night was a nightmare-scape. Any unadapted to it faced an all-encompassing panic caused by the knowledge that nothing was certain, that predators could be lurking anywhere, fear of not knowing what you may step on, what you may touch, fear of not knowing where you are or where you're going. There are very few places left where true darkness can be experienced. For those with those first sparks of fire, the lanterns, the light bulbs, the nightmare was banished. Suddenly the light could be explored. The unknown could become known just by creating a spark or flipping a switch, which recreated the gift God gave to us. But 100 miles from the comfort of the Montauk Lighthouse, floating at the mercy of the wind and tide, is one of the places darkness is complete. Even on a night where the moon shone full and bright, and all the lights on the boat were shining in their full brilliance, nothing could illuminate further than the confines of the vessel. If I stood at the edge and stuck my arm overboard, it would instantly disappear. This was the kind of darkness that could swallow a man in an instant. Inky, as some would call it, but more like a black fog, as if you could grab a handful, but every time it slips through your fingers. As the night grew on and the fish failed to bite, the crew could no longer keep themselves awake. They either chose to retire to the cabin or fall asleep where they sat. For each of them, this and living in Montauk was their escape from the complicated world. Lastly, there was me, torso propped up against a seat cushion, eyes trained on the tip of the fishing pole for any signs of movement. And so I remained, half drifting out of consciousness, before being jerked awake by the reel whispering every time the tide tugged at the line, that click which sends a rush of adrenaline through every hand that's held a line. Groups of men will stare at a reel after every whisper and pray it turns into the scream of a fish running away with the line, jumping at every twitch. But even that conditioning that has been pushed on me since a young age couldn't keep me awake, and my eyelashes fell onto my cheeks and the rest was dreams of fish. Fucking shit broke the motherly arms of sleep and twined around every crew member. There was a clamor as men jumped out of bed and hurried to pull on boots they couldn't see. Everything was gone until you bumped into it. The only reliable navigation were the thuds of the rest of the crew as they crashed into everything like unsteady toddlers. Eventually, the entire crew figured out how to crawl out onto the deck where we all sat silently. Even the reel held its breath in suspense. We looked off into the void in different directions, but all saw the same thing, nothing save the pinpricks of stars, inconceivably far away, and the moon but a foot away, still unable to penetrate the wall of darkness. "It's beautiful," I heard from my left. The first word spoken, piercing the silence that was so loud you could hear it, manifesting as a hum, the brain attempting to make sense of nothing. In response, grumbles and mumbles, but I was silent, staring straight ahead. Also terrifying, we all turned towards the bow of the boat where the voice of our in-house philosopher originated. Although we couldn't see him, we all looked up as if we were disciples waiting for breadcrumbs of wisdom from a mighty prophet. If you think about it, this is the way the world was once. We've changed the whole world, brought light into places it wasn't supposed to be. Even out here, we brought our lights and changed the true nature of the world. We played God, each and every one of us, just by turning on a light. It was a godly act to create light on the first day, but even that had limitations. It was limited by the darkness that had come to every night. So really, we have surpassed God in his creations. Where he faltered, we picked up the torch and made his work complete, or so we would like to think. But this night has proven us to fall to the same pitfalls as God himself. We thought we could surpass him, but we are no better. Some crew members, I assume, since I could not see them, were slack-jawed in awe. Others critiqued, others agreed. The philosopher was unmoved by all, and as the halo of light that signaled the beginning of false dawn began to crest the horizon, he retired back into the cabin and promptly fell asleep. The coming of the sun revealed the boat was left in disarray. Buckets of chum and bait had been overturned by blind feet and left to ooze across the deck. Men begrudgingly stooped low to right them and sprayed away any evidence of mishap. With the coming of the light, all aboard the crew boat had suddenly become steady-footed again. As if the sun had revived them, each had regained his normal stride and no longer walked heavy-footed and groping. As we worked, the first tendrils of fire splashed across the deck, washing away our nightmare as if it had never been there at all. It was time to return to our true purpose there, to catch tuna and to make money. Engines revved to life and were put into gear. Lures were attached and lines were let out. Any thought of what happened that night disappeared as quickly as the night itself. Thoughts of how small we truly are in the scheme of things, of how out of place we really are without our illuminating creations. Thoughts of how the work of God, science, or some other force had come to save us from that black hell never came to mind. The salvation had not been amazing after all. The sun has never failed to come.
At this time, we have a keynote speaker who will talk about the art of writing for a while. His name is Roger Rosenblatt. He is one of America's great essayists. He's a humorist, a novelist. He is the best-selling author of 5 New York Times notable books of the year. He's won an Emmy, the Robert F. Kennedy Book Prize, 2 George Foster Peabody Awards, the George Polk Award, and he's been a recipient and winner of the Kenyon Review Award for Lifetime Literary Achievement. It's fair to say he's one of New York's great literary lions. His PBS NewsHour commentary won him an Emmy. Among his award-winning books are Thomas Murphy, The Book of Love, Making Toast, and nearly a dozen others. Perhaps his best known is Lapham Rising, Unless It Moves the Human Heart, and Children of War. His most recent book is called Rules for Aging, which is well needed in this world. He's basically a humorist, and I'd like to ask him to come on out and speak to everyone. Thank you.
That was very good for Dan, only 2/3 inaccurate. Thank you for making me part of this impressive event. It's impressive for a couple of reasons. One is Dan himself, who really is impressive to have created Dan's paper, which has created a community of the East End, which is no easy feat. It's not easy to create a community of normal people, but to create a community of 500,000 self-involved and self-anointed geniuses. The other impressive thing, at least to me, is the idea of giving substantial awards, as Dan's paper is giving, for nonfiction from a publication that publishes only fiction. Some of you know that my wife and I lived in Bethesda, Maryland with our grandchildren for a long time, seven and a half years. And we lived on the lower level of the house. And I would sometimes go over to the kids' local public school and talk to the children. And once I went over and when my granddaughter Jessica was in the 4th grade, and she introduced me to her 4th grade classmates thus: "This is my grandfather Bappo." Bappo is my dignified parental name. "This is my grandfather Bappo. He lives in the basement and does nothing." I'll talk a bit about the writer's life doing nothing. My own writer's life began with simply a love of language and a love of strangeness, and I took that from movies. As a kid, I loved strange lines in movies. I would memorize these lines, and in conversations with others, I would try to get the lines into the conversations. In other words, people would be having a perfectly normal conversation, and I would be waiting like a cormorant to spout for that one opening where I could say this line. You can imagine what a delightful social companion I was. The lines I took were not the ordinary lines, not, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn or anything like that, but lines that simply appealed to me. And I heard one the other day in a trailer for a horror movie called Snowman, in which somebody said to someone else, "We tried blowing him up, but it just pissed him off." That would be the kind of line I would try to get in. There were two lines in my delightful social pursuit that I never, that were extremely difficult to get in, and one I never got in at all. It was from the movie Earthquake. You remember the disaster movies of the 1970s. And in Earthquake, George Kennedy, who was playing a cop, was trying to protect a young woman who was in turn being pursued by a man who pursued her through the entire movie. You would think an earthquake would have been enough to distract him, but he was, as people say today, focused. In any case, the earthquake hit, he jumps on the woman, George Kennedy jumps on the guy, shoots him dead, and says to her, "I don't know what it is, earthquakes just bring out the worst in some guys." That was a line I never could get into a normal conversation. However, when I tell you the line that I did get in, it will sound on the face of it far more difficult. And it was from, you may remember, at least I saw them on television, the Sherlock Holmes movies with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. Nigel Bruce is Dr. Watson. And in this particular movie, Dr. Watson was trying to impress a few people on a train, impress them with the great feats of solving of mysteries of Sherlock Holmes. And so Watson said to the people who evidently had not heard of Holmes, "Haven't you heard of the giant rat of Sumatra?" Haven't you heard of the giant rat of Sumatra? Decades passed as I waited for an opportunity to get that line into a conversation. You have to appreciate the difficulty of it. First of all, there was the rat, then there was the size of the rat, then there was Sumatra. But the real difficulty is that you had to express a kind of haughty incredulity. Haven't you heard of the giant rat of Sumatra? Like, who has not? Anyway, I was working for the Washington Post, and we went out with some friends for lunch, and it happened to be the 50th anniversary of Mickey Mouse, the creation of Mickey Mouse. And someone at the table said, "Has there ever been a bigger rodent?" Like Gall, writing is divided among three parts: rejection, humiliation, and poverty. Of these, only humiliation can be occasionally amusing, but never to the principles. The writers are humiliated as a course, and this is what we do. We live to be humiliated. We give readings in bookstores, sometimes drawing throngs of 4 and 5 people, one of whom is there just to take a nap, and another assuredly is there for the wrong reading, that he or she showed up thinking it was someone else. In Boston, I gave a reading, and a woman came up to me, her face drained with anguish, and said, "I thought you were going to be Alice McDermott." I said, "So did I." As it happens, Alice McDermott, a friend, and I have an ongoing humiliations contest. And she pulled ahead. She pulled ahead recently in the contest. Could you just let me know this a few days ago? She was giving a reading in Pennsylvania, and the mayor of this town introduced her by saying, Alice McDermott was born in Nigeria. Alice McDermott was born in Brooklyn, has never seen Nigeria. So Alice, being very polite, and just let it pass, she gave her reading, and then they came the time for the Q&A, always a delight for writers. And someone's first question was it difficult learning English after your native Nigerian? Until then, I had been ahead in the contest from my first experience. I think it was an early experience anyway, reading at the 92nd Street Y. I was reading what I thought to be an effective piece of prose to an audience of, say, like yourselves. Then I finished my reading and looked around in the Q&A, and there was only one hand up. And I acknowledged him, and he said, "Are you related to Roger Rosenblatt, the great Ukrainian cantor?" I said, "I'm not sure, I doubt it." Looked around the audience again, praying for a question that had something to do with what I was reading. Nobody, the same guy, raising his hand again. "Such a voice," he said. Again, I looked around, praying for some relevant question. Nothing. He raises his hand again. "You know," he said, "you don't look a thing like him." There are two basic modes of living for writers. One is fury and one is serenity. I will read you two pieces that I think exemplify each extreme. I was going to sing you my latest song. I'm trying to think of see if I can, oh yes. "Who's going to man the fort after they send Manafort to the Clinker Blues?" But my wife asked me not to say that, so I didn't say it. Okay, the first one is fury, and this one is called May I Kill You? "And what do you do?" "I'm a writer. May I kill you?" "What do you write, if you don't mind my asking?" "I do mind. May I kill you?" "Would I have read anything you wrote?" "No, no one has. May I kill you?" "That last novel of yours, what was it about?" "Nothing. May I?" "And yet it showed promise. Or am I thinking of another writer?" "You are." "I'm a novelist too, you know. I wonder if I could send you my manuscript." "Oh, of course. Please send me your manuscript, but not by snail mail. Send it FedEx, so that I can have it sooner. You know, I was remarking to my pet bat Arthur the other night. I said, 'Arthur, I wish to God anyone would send me his manuscript, or hers. I'd like to read the manuscripts of North America first, then extend my purview to the Baltic states and Indonesia, where I understand there are many more manuscripts.'" "Are you okay? You're sounding overwrought, kind of manic. But I guess all writers are a bit wound tight." "Yes, we are. May I kill you?" "I must tell you, this piece of yours is great, but it's not for us." Who is it for, do you think?" "Can't say. It's just not for us." "Maybe it's not for anyone? What do you think?" "I don't know, but I do know it's not for us. On the other hand, we really loved it and want to publish it as soon as possible." "You do?" "Absolutely. 4 pages long." "Is it ever? We loved it." "What's wrong with the first 100 pages?" "Nothing major. We can't tell who the main character is, and we don't know what the story is about, and we wouldn't be interested if we did. You see what I mean?" "Absolutely. I could not agree more. I worked on the novel only 6 years, give or take, to pass the time. I knew it was shit, but you know how bored one gets. It's just something to do." "We understand perfectly. Would you like to kill us?" "Would I, but not quickly. Crush your tongue in a vice, pluck your eyes out with sherbet scoops, sear your ass with a soldering iron. That's the way I'd like to do it." "I love your work." You love my work?" "It reminds me of Proust." "It does? Have you ever read Proust?" "No, no one has. No one's ever read Proust. It's just something to say." So you really don't love my work?" "No, but I love Proust." "Me too. May I kill you?" "Know what I love best about your work? It's neorealism, that's what, and it's Neoplatonism, and it's neologisms, they're the tops. I also love its lapidary style, its catachresis, everything actually, the entire Are you from the New York Review of Books?" "Who isn't?" What did your review about my novel, what did you say? I forget. We called it lurid yet redeeming. Ah, yes. We also called it lacking in style and content, yet brave. Personally, I don't think I've ever read a braver novel, how it fought off all those other novels. Oh, see what I've done, I've hurt your feelings. Look, the trouble with you writers is you're too touchy, too, how shall I put it, needy. Why not say needy? Needy, yes. All you ever want is praise, praise, and more praise. And when you don't get it, you get all steamed up and pissed off, and you seek revenge. Revenge against us. You want to kill us, other people. Why, you don't even think about other people, unless, of course, we're praising you. Any other time, we're useless to you. Get real, will you? No one receives praise. That's the way of the world. When the guy gives you change at the 7-Eleven, do you tell him, "Hey man, great change"? Planet Earth, me bucko, your work may be brilliant or it may stink and no one will ever know who you are, and you'll die and people will discover your unpublished stuff posthumously and say it stinks too. Why should you care? That's not why you write. You write to do it, isn't that so? Do you mean that? Certainly I mean it. You think we writers are destructively self-involved? Duh. Well, I must say I never thought of it from your point of view, and what you say makes sense. I don't write for you, for any of you, I write for me. Yes, this conversation has been a real eye-opener. Thanks. Thanks very much. Just one more question. That's the fury, here's the serenity. This is a piece, this is the most recent piece I wrote, called Just a Song in Twilight. You're born, they coo and sing to you and hold you up to the light, like a watermark. You learn things or you don't, people congratulate you or they don't. You succeed or you fail or you fall, you fail and then succeed and then fall on your face. You take pleasure in Shakespeare, Vermeer, Rachmaninoff, Ella, Thelonious Monk. Then they all bore you, except Monk. You win many prizes, you win no prizes, you fall in love or you don't, but eventually you do, and that person is the one for you, or not. Someone else is the one for you. You live alone, you conclude that everyone lives alone and call that philosophy. You no longer believe in God, but then something happens and you believe, but then something else happens and you don't. You develop a surprising late life interest in the Song dynasty, or in geology, or in the Sex Pistols, or in harness racing. You age and weaken, your eyesight turns bleary, your hearing creative. You grow bitter, or serene, or something of each. You die, or not, or both. After I finished a reading recently, a young couple approached the lectern. We thought you were dead, they said. I nodded enigmatically because they were half right. Old writers exist in a kind of gloaming, and it grows increasingly difficult to tell if we are dead or alive. My so-called vital signs would suggest that I walk among the living. Walk is an exaggeration, since even on my more sprightly days I urge my legs forward like Boris Karloff in The Mummy. But there's just as much evidence that I passed away several years ago. My world of reference is dead. See Boris Karloff reference. My friend's world of reference is dead. In our exchanges, verbal and written, we regularly resurrect superannuated names and events, such as Judge Crater and Oh, the Humanity. The books I favor are by dead people. The singers I like are long dead, including those who covered songs originally sung by those who are also dead, as are the writers of the songs. To be sure, I am not provably dead, just nearly departed. I like a little appreciation of language like that. I am not provably dead, just nearly departed. Yet the realm of the living recedes farther and farther from my view, and the world becomes an alien planet. The papers or TV tell me that a celebrity couple is breaking up, and their split is a cause of tragic weeping to everyone. I know not her name, or his, or that they are married, or why they are celebrities. A new movie stars this person and that, and the trailer tells me I loved them both in previous movies. I never heard of the previous movies, or of the stars. I can identify nothing, nearly nothing, in a recent headline printed in People magazine. Kylie Jenner's overdrawn lips inspired Honey Boo Boo when she did Mama June's pageant makeup. I do not even know if I know the people I know. I received a note from a friend who asked if I met the poet Marilyn Hacker. I wrote back, I don't know. I was happy enough to recognize the name of my friend. Writers traffic in dead things, so this in-between state of being does not arrive with a shock. It is our business to bring characters, images, and memories to life from the frozen sea within us, dead Kafka reference. This is true of our work at any age, but the older we get, the more we are aware that our word supply is dwindling. The theme and subject supply as well. When we have said all we have to say, hurry up please, it's time, dead T.S. Eliot reference. Until then we straddle the realms. Others have done this, so it's not really a big deal. Charon, the ferryman of Hades, transported the souls of the newly deceased across the river Styx and Acheron. Persephone, daughter of Zeus, was abducted to the underworld, where she adopted the yearly schedule of spending 8 months among the living and 4 months among the dead, or an East Hampton vacation. Actually, I just wrote that in. This was not a public. Ghosts, who seem to be gaining prominence in modern literature, have always had it both ways. Technically dead, they do their scaring and consoling above ground. And of course, Jesus is said to have died into the life of the world. I do not presume to speak for other writers my age, but for me, everything that was once adventurous and exciting about the work begins to vanish like a gambler's lucky streak, dead Irving Berlin reference. I have no interest in fame. I had a taste of fame when I was young, and it only made me uncomfortable and wary of myself. Never much taken with the life of getting and spending, dead Wordsworth reference. I'm even less so now, having acquired most of the things I ever wanted, both to my benefit and regret. I have no ambitions other than maintaining the safety and well-being of my family, my friends, and my dog. I have no interest in travel. When I was a journalist, I sometimes wrote of wars in Northern Ireland, Beirut, Cambodia, Sudan, Rwanda, and elsewhere, where the mad cruelty and sadness of the world would temper anyone's curiosity about faraway places. Not only do I never travel, I rarely move, unless you count as motion the rising out of and settling back into my very easy chair. One day I imagine I'll disintegrate completely in my chair, my parts absorbed by the leather. My great-grandchildren will bound into the house yelling, "Let's sit in Bapo." Passions have cooled, grudges retain a low flame, but the heat is gone from white to pearl gray. Self-recriminations, on the other hand, never die or fade away, dead General MacArthur reference. So impressive is the stamina of the self-tormenting human conscience that the wrongs one does in a lifetime are more vivid in old age than when they originally occurred. No number of good works outweighs them in the balance. Maybe our sins constitute the true living dead, zombies on a loop. Before boarding Charon's ferry, writers tend to look back to see what we have done in our writing. An advantage of published work is proof that one existed, and to determine what, if anything, we bequeathed to people, such as the young couple at the reading who thought me dead. All those pages we turned out, the slag hills of debris, what do they come to? C.D. Lewis said, "What old men dream is pure restatement of the original theme." That's true, I think. Every writer tells just one story, told over and over, that moves among the various forms of telling and to which we return in a dogged effort to understand it. As for the bequest, what writers leave the world is love. Love at last sight. Try as we may to walk out the door giving the world the bird and one lusty fuck you, the nature of what we do inevitably civilizes us. Of all the arts, writing is the most expansive. And the wider one goes with one's feelings and thoughts, the more one appreciates the underlying nobility of the race and tacitly forgives the world we probe and eviscerate. Our parting shot is love. That old Celtic tune, just a song at twilight. It laments our weariness and sorrow, yet ends with love's old sweet song. Love's old sweet song. Thanks.
I just want to tell you one of my favorite scenes in one of the essays that he wrote. I may not have it exact, but It's about a East Hampton realtor woman, and whenever she gets a very expensive house on the market, she goes to a friend's house who has a home, big mansion on Georgia Pond, and goes down. There's a little dock and a diving board, and she goes down to the end of the diving board, takes off all her clothes and jumps in. That's it. So they know who she is. Our next presenter is Eric Feil. He's the COO of Dan's Papers, and he's editorial director of the paper. And that's probably because he's the smartest man in the room, in my opinion. Eric, come on out. He's going to present the Judges' Choice Awards.
See, everybody at some point wants to be Dan, don't they? And nothing is more Dan than a little chapeau. Now, as my wife has told me, it doesn't look good on me. I think my head's too big and it doesn't carry me well. So I offer to you. Oh, that's not bad. And there may be more outside. You never know, or all of our events. Oh! You're going to be in the Artist Writer softball game next year. So thank you all again for coming. I want to say one more thank you to all the sponsors of this event to make it possible for us to be here at beautiful Guildhall. Guildhall, thank you for having us back once again. Thank you to Len Riggio and Barnes & Noble, the major funding for this event, without whom none of this would be possible, so thank you to them. Thank you to Michael Huber, thank you to Parago, thank you to California Closets. And then on a food and beverage related note, thank you to Buy Beverage. Thank you to Serafino, who will be hosting a dinner afterward, and thank you to Union Cantina, which will be doing some fine, fabulous food out in the gala cocktail reception, to which you're all going to come, right? You're all going to be there? Little wine, little drink, little wine, little food? Yes, perfect. Best way to end the evening. So I have the pleasure now of presenting 3 Judges' Choice Awards for the Dan's Papers Literary Prize for Nonfiction. Once the judging was done, I had the pleasure to actually read all the stories, so I'm sure these 3 are fantastic. The Judges' Choice Awards for 2018, for which you will get a plaque, for which you will get not a little, fedora type thing, but a fine Dan's baseball hat, which, is not available to the general public. And of course, a gift card to Hampton Coffee. Our first Judges' Choice winner, and if you're here, for representatives here, if you're just really good friends with them, you come on up when I call the names and collect the awards, and then you'll go outside with Barbara, our photographer, and find photo opportunity. A Day and a Wave by Melissa Berman. The End by Richard Weissman. And Growing Up on the Rock by Laura Zavato. Congratulations to all of you. I will turn the lectern over, much to my chagrin, back to my friend Dan Rettiner. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you guys out at the cocktail party. Thank you.
Well, we come now to the main award, the biggest award of the evening, which is the Dan's Papers Literary Prize for Nonfiction First Prize. I'm going to make that award myself. The winner receives a trophy, which we have with us, $7,500, and the honor of having won this whole competition. So let's see what we have. I'm told I've done this out of order. So we're going to do the two runner-up presentations, which is going to be presented by Eve Elliott. And I should tell you that Eve Elliott has entered 5 times to this competition. She's won second prize twice and first prize once. And that's pretty extraordinary. And she's not a professional writer. Eve, come on out.
It's really exciting to be in a room full of writers and people that are so interested in writing. And I'm going to be presenting the runner-up awards, which are worth $500 apiece to the winners, but also the prize of having finished a piece and having had the courage to submit it. So, the envelope, please. So, the Dance Papers Literary Prize for Nonfiction runner-up number 2 is Isn't Waiting with Suspense more interesting than tedious waiting? Hide and Seek, a game for grown-ups by Laura Tesh. And would you like to say anything to the writers here? It's not obligatory.
I'd just like to say thank you so much. I can't believe this spoke to people, and I'm just so happy that I wrote it. Thanks.
Thank you. And the award, the Dance Papers Literary Prize for Nonfiction runner-up number 1 is Footprints on the Ceiling, Jim Fields.
I'd like to dedicate this story to my father-in-law, who it's about. Thank you.
Well, okay, so here we come to the grand prize award. Let's see what we got here. The winner, The A Train to Montauk by Cassandra Catherine. I think that's her. Hope so.
supporting my creative endeavors, and to the Wi-Fi for working and entertaining my 2-year-old while I pick this up. Thank you.
Okay, this one is called The A Train to Montauk. Hold on a sec. August in New York City has the strange and ominous feel of a coming death. The air hovers above, stagnant and heavy, and the smell of overheated concrete pulses through the endless streets. The last remaining weekends of the summer are plagued by the feeling of abandonment as New Yorkers flee in droves to escape the rising temperatures. The Hamptons, Fire Island, Woodstock, anywhere but here. If you rode the A train on any Friday afternoon like I did, you could see them clamoring into the station like little moths to a lamppost. They filled the train cars with their desperation, straw hats peeking out through the corners of luggage, teasing the rest of us like little children looking out through the back seats of minivan windows. And finally, when the doors opened at 34th Street, like a gasp, they ran out to catch the Long Island Railroad. The rest of us quickly darting glances to find empty seats and then heaving a sigh of relief as the train finally pulled out at Penn Station. I watched this scene repeatedly with fascination growing up, always wondering about this place called the Hamptons and these stately people who raced off there. With each passing Friday afternoon of my childhood, it grew in mystery. The name alone, plural, instead of singular, seemed intentionally vague, as though it were a place so illustrious it had to be given an alias. I had learned bits and pieces about it growing up in Brooklyn Heights. The Heights was the kind of neighborhood where you would certainly know people who summered out east. The kids at school talked about it, and at the consignment shop I worked at on Pierpont Street, there were women who sold chicken pot pies that she baked in Sagaponic. In the fall, when her husband would bring her chocolates from Paris wrapped in pastel-colored tin foils, she would donate them to the cashiers at the shop so as to avoid the calories. I happily ate them, imagining these elegant women of the Hamptons, slim waists, gardening in silk dresses while their pies cooled on light-washed marble countertops. While I was lucky enough to get out of town in those brutal city summers, my family never headed to the Hamptons. Aside from the fact that we were probably the least wealthy in a wealthy neighborhood, my parents just weren't really the type. My father wore the same bright green gardening clogs for 20 years, and he would scrape the mold out of jam jars to salvage the rest of it. My mother loved canned soup, and she always packed sandwiches on white hamburger buns for car rides. We spent our summers at my mom's cottage in Rhode Island eating clam cakes and scouring the tide pools for hermit crabs. It was the house she grew up in. Her grandfather had built it with his own hands using money he had won at an auction. We sat all day at the beach in Narragansett, scraggly haired and always a little bit sunburnt, in our tiny cabana my mother would send us down the ocean to collect seawater so that we could boil lobsters at night. We were always the last to leave. It was simple and sweet, and I loved it, but I was always curious about this place out east. Once I graduated from college and started my first job in the city, my train rides resumed, and I was reminded again about Hampton summers. I pretended not to care as an ex-boyfriend secured a share house with some of his friends and posted photos on Facebook that I stared at over freeze pops on my Kia sofa downtown, the heat creaking up into the 90s, our shitty air conditioners heaving with all their might in the background. As August approached, my roommates and I grew listless with each passing weekend until a friend came up with the suggestion that we take a hotel room in Montauk. Although the room was meant for two, she was certain all five of us could fit, and even better, the price was hard to beat. The next Friday, instead of looking for a seat on the A train, I exited at 34th Street with the hordes of other New Yorkers, feeling a bit like a traitor, but also too preoccupied to care. As the packed train rushed from one station to the next, the feeling of excitement was overwhelming, like children on their last day of school. It was hard to remember a time when summer felt so young. Southampton, Bridgehampton, East Hampton, the names of this secret place finally started to unravel. And by the time we arrived in Montauk, I felt like I had traveled a world away from New York City. Our hotel room was as if to be expected, scratchy sheets, old carpets, quilted floral bedding, but we were elated to be here, regardless of the fact that we had been told Montauk wasn't really considered the Hamptons. We were instantly seduced. It was beautiful, yes, but there was an energy to it, a low hum of excitement that weaved its way through those tipsy star-covered evenings like sand sliding just through your grasp. Where Montauk had settled into her rough beauty, we discovered the Hamptons to be meticulous in her upkeep. Perfectly hedged driveways, rows of brightly colored hydrangeas, impossibly beautiful people in long, gauzy dresses, dancing drunkenly in the moonlight like something you would read about in a Fitzgerald novel. We watched the sunsets nearly swallow us whole across from Gossman's Dock, drank cheap liquor at the Memory Hotel, and sank our toes into white sand beaches. Like a bad romance, I felt awkwardly out of place, but still hopelessly enamored. We had discovered with little trouble what made this place so intoxicating, and almost as quickly as we had left, we were already making plans to return. Monday mornings back at my white-walled cubicle felt like coming down from a bad drug. The sound of printers spewing out inane memos and Nancy microwaving her lean cuisine exactly at noon, as she always did, seemed impossible next to the memory of the weekend. We needed to go back. And so it began that the Hamptons became a place we knew. We learned where to get the best lobster roll, which beaches you could park at, and how to properly order a BBC at Cyril's. We spent the rest of that summer and many thereafter dangling our fingers out of cab windows after a long night of dancing, the sweet ocean breeze drying our perspiration. We watched sunset after sunset at places I can't recall, and perhaps more likely, they no longer exist. We kissed boys whose names we would never remember at clam bakes we were not invited to. I am 35 now. We drive out east, but nearing County Road 111. The clouds are moving overhead effortlessly and deliberately like boats navigating the sound. Soon we will be met by the Stargazer statue, which sits on a farm on the east side of the road. I Googled it once to learn its name and discovered that the artist had meant it to portray the connection between earth and heaven. That seemed like the perfect way to mark the shift between central Long Island with its fast, zooming highways and 7-Elevens to the lush, loopy roads of the Hamptons. I have been coming here for almost 10 years now. My husband and I fell in love one summer at a share house. We bought a little home on Toppings Path and sold it. We had a baby. We discovered over the years that this place that seduced us with its beauty had more layers and depth to it the more you loved it. We didn't come for the parties or the restaurants. We weren't invited anyway. We came and will always come back to that indescribable way that an old lover is sewn into your memories, like a perfume you can never forget. As we turn towards Butter Lane, I can see them, piling off the LIRR, luggage in hand, waving frantically to loved ones. We round the corner, and just like that, they're gone.